Absolutely, and what many people don't realize is that for women over 60, sensuality isn't something that disappears with age but rather something that evolves, deepens, and can be more powerful than ever before when nurtured with intention. And that's where these three transformative sensual practices come in. Not for performance or approval, not for conforming to outdated societal standards of beauty, but as a way of returning to oneself, reconnecting to one's body, and reawakening that inner spark of confidence, femininity, and pleasure that so often gets buried under years of caregiving, stress, shame, or neglect. And the truth is, many older women have been subtly told, by the media, by partners, by internalized messages from decades of living in a youth-obsessed culture, that after menopause their desirability diminishes, that they must now fade quietly into invisibility. But the reality couldn't be further from the truth, because this stage of life can actually be the most empowered and sensually alive if women are willing to reclaim their bodies, rewrite the story around aging, and explore new, nourishing ways of experiencing pleasure and presence. And the first sensual practice begins not in the bedroom, but in the mirror, with what's known as conscious mirror work, where a woman stands before her own reflection, not to judge, fix, or critique, but to meet herself, to soften her gaze, to breathe slowly and intentionally while looking into her own eyes and gently caressing the parts of her body she has long ignored or criticized. And though it may feel awkward at first, this kind of loving self-observation gradually melts away the layers of disconnection and begins to rewire how a woman sees herself, not as an aging body to hide, but as a vibrant, evolving being whose laugh lines, curves, and softness tell a story of resilience, of nurturing others, of wisdom earned through time. And by spending even just 5 minutes a day in this quiet act of self-recognition, many women begin to feel a new energy returning to their posture, their voice, and their interactions, because confidence is born from how we treat ourselves. And when a woman starts to look at herself with admiration instead of disdain, the entire world begins to respond differently to her presence. The second sensual practice is a slower, more embodied form of movement. Not traditional exercise for calorie burning or appearance, but intentional, flowing movement like sensual stretching, intuitive dance, or gentle hip circles performed in private, with music that awakens emotion and rhythm, allowing the body to move without choreography, judgment, or goals. And this form of movement reactivates the connection between body and mind, helps release stored emotional tension from the hips and pelvis, a place where many women carry stress and trauma, and invites playfulness, grace, and self-expression back into daily life. And for many women who have spent decades moving their bodies only for others or within rigid routines, rediscovering movement as sensual art rather than duty is revolutionary, because it's no longer about looking a certain way but about feeling good in the skin they're in. And the third sensual practice may be the most powerful of all. It's about redefining touch, not in the context of giving, as so many women have done throughout life, but as a way of receiving, of exploring what feels good, nurturing, or erotic without the need for a partner. This can include self-massage with scented oils, mindful masturbation, or simply resting a hand over the heart or belly with deep breath and intention. And what happens when a woman regularly engages in pleasurable, non-performative touch is a reawakening of dormant neural pathways, a rekindling of oxytocin release, and an anchoring into the present moment where her body no longer feels like a stranger or a source of shame, but like home, like ally, like a trusted vessel of delight. And when these three sensual practices, mirror work, embodied movement, and conscious touch, are woven into daily life, they begin to shift a woman's identity at the root, because she is no longer living by the old narrative that sensuality belongs to the young, thin, or perfect, but rather that sensuality is a natural, vital part of being alive and remains fully accessible at any age. And this shift doesn't just revive confidence in isolated moments, it ripples outward into how a woman dresses, speaks, holds herself, flirts, sets boundaries, and welcomes joy. And it's important to note that this revival isn't about returning to who she was in her 20s or 30s, but about fully stepping into who she is now, with more depth, clarity, and freedom than ever before. And while the world may not always celebrate the sensual power of women over 60, the women who engage in these practices don't need that external validation. because they begin to carry a kind of magnetism that comes from within, a radiance that isn't about wrinkle-free skin or youthful curves, but about aliveness, comfort in one's own skin, and the kind of unshakable confidence that says, "I know who I am, I know what I enjoy, and I don't apologize for either." And in that space, sensuality becomes not just a private pleasure but a public presence, something that inspires others and redefines what aging looks and feels like, making it clear that the second half of life can be every bit as juicy, electric, and meaningful as the first. And while Part 1 introduced the core practices of sensual mirror work, embodied movement, and conscious touch, Part 2 dives deeper into how these practices translate into real-world confidence and impact the way older women experience not just intimacy, but everyday life. Because when a woman consistently engages with her sensuality from a place of self-love and curiosity rather than shame or obligation, she doesn't just change how she feels in private, she changes how she shows up in the world, how she carries herself through a room, how she speaks to others, how she dresses, and even how she makes choices about her health, relationships, and boundaries. And one of the first things many women over 60 notice when they begin to reawaken their sensual nature is a dramatic improvement in body awareness and posture, not in a stiff or artificial way but in a relaxed, confident ease that others instantly sense. Like when a woman walks into a store or sits down at a cafe and doesn't shrink herself, doesn't fidget with her clothes, doesn't apologize for her presence. Instead, she claims space with grace, not arrogance but assurance. And that is deeply magnetic to others, especially in a culture that often expects older women to make themselves small, quiet, or invisible, and it's in that magnetic presence that the real power of sensual confidence begins to show. Because this confidence isn't about being provocative or dressing a certain way, it's about being fully at home in one's body, and that presence can make someone twice as attractive, regardless of age, because it's real, rooted, and authentic. And what's truly fascinating is how this shift begins to ripple out into relationships, especially romantic or intimate ones, because for women who may have spent years in marriages or partnerships where sensuality was routine, suppressed, or absent altogether, rediscovering their own pleasure can reignite a sense of playfulness and curiosity that changes how they connect with a partner, or how they pursue new love if they're single. And rather than chasing external validation or settling for unsatisfying encounters, these women begin to set clearer boundaries and ask for what they want, not just sexually, but emotionally and spiritually too. Because when you're in touch with what feels good and you believe you deserve it, you no longer tolerate what drains you. And this becomes a catalyst for healthier communication, more fulfilling intimacy, and greater joy in connection. And even in solo life, this confidence reshapes how women create pleasure and beauty around themselves, whether that's preparing a delicious meal, buying flowers just because, dancing alone in the kitchen, or creating rituals of self-care that honor their sensuality as sacred, not taboo. And many women report that the more they embrace sensual living, the more alive their senses become, not just touch, but taste, smell, sound, and sight, leading to more vivid experiences and deeper emotional resonance in daily activities. And it's not uncommon for women to describe this shift as a coming home to themselves, especially if they spent much of life pleasing others, raising children, or conforming to roles that required self-denial. And now, for perhaps the first time in decades, they're giving themselves permission to be the source of their own joy, which is a radical act of self-love. And what's more, this journey into sensual reconnection also has profound benefits for physical health and vitality. Because when the body is touched with kindness, moved with intention, and treated with reverence, stress hormones begin to drop, sleep improves, circulation increases, pelvic floor muscles become more responsive, and the nervous system shifts from fight or flight into rest and digest, an essential shift for healing and aging well. And even hormone levels like oxytocin and dopamine begin to rebalance, supporting mood, memory, and motivation. And all of this happens not through pills or procedures but through consistent, joyful engagement with the body in ways that feel nourishing, not punishing. And perhaps most transformative of all is what happens to a woman's internal narrative. Those quiet but persistent thoughts that say, "You're too old, you're not desirable anymore, you should hide that part of yourself." those begin to dissolve when replaced by daily experiences of sensual delight, and over time, a new voice emerges, one that says, "I am beautiful because I exist. My body is worthy of love and pleasure. My age is not a barrier but a gateway." And that voice becomes the inner compass that guides how she walks through life. And this is not about pretending aging doesn't happen, or chasing youth. It's about redefining what mature sensuality looks like, claiming it as wise, powerful, soft, and sacred. And once a woman taps into that truth, she no longer needs permission from society, from media, or even from her past self. She becomes the author of her own sensual story. And that story can be filled with color, depth, desire, and confidence at every turn, no matter how many candles are on the birthday cake. And continuing from where we left off, the transformation that occurs when women over 60 commit to these sensual practices goes far beyond just feeling good or looking confident. It reshapes the very way they experience pleasure, intimacy, and connection in profound and lasting ways, because when sensuality is reclaimed through consistent daily rituals, it often sparks a deep healing process that helps women release old wounds, traumas, or limiting beliefs that may have accumulated over a lifetime. And this healing isn't just emotional or psychological, it's somatic, meaning it happens in the body itself as muscles relax, nerve pathways rewire, and the breath flows more freely. And as this somatic healing unfolds, many women report feeling more grounded, more present, and more joyful in their daily lives. And this shift can unlock new levels of creativity, spontaneity, and even spiritual connection that ripple out into every area of life, from relationships to personal goals to how they approach self-care. And what's truly beautiful is that sensuality at this age isn't about chasing youth or trying to recapture past experiences. It's about embracing a new kind of eroticism that is rooted in wisdom, self-compassion, and authenticity. And this eroticism honors the body as it is now, with all its changes, scars, and stories, rather than fighting against it or wishing it away. And in this way, older women create a sensual identity that's uniquely their own, free from cultural expectations or pressures, which is incredibly liberating. And this liberation often encourages women to explore new forms of intimacy and connection, whether that means trying new things with a partner, exploring solo pleasure with openness and curiosity, or deepening emotional intimacy through vulnerability and communication. And because these sensual practices cultivate self-awareness and presence, women find that their relationships, romantic, familial, and social, improve naturally, as they bring more authenticity and groundedness into their interactions. And this authenticity is magnetic, drawing people in and fostering deeper, more meaningful connections that nourish the soul. And it's important to recognize that sensual confidence is not a linear journey. There will be days of doubt, discomfort, or grief as women navigate changes in their bodies, energy, and social roles. But having a daily practice rooted in kindness and curiosity provides a steady anchor during these times, offering a way back to self-love and pleasure even when external circumstances feel challenging. And as sensual confidence grows, women often notice an increase in overall well-being, better sleep, reduced anxiety, improved mood, and a stronger sense of purpose, which underscores the holistic power of these practices beyond just sexual health. And on a broader level, the ripple effects of older women embracing their sensuality can help dismantle harmful ageist and sexist stereotypes that diminish the visibility and value of mature women, challenging cultural narratives that equate aging with decline or loss, and instead highlighting the vibrant, complex, and powerful nature of female desire at every stage of life. And this cultural shift is crucial not only for individual empowerment, but also for creating a more inclusive and respectful society where all bodies and experiences are honored. And finally, it's worth noting that these sensual practices can be adapted to suit any lifestyle, mobility level, or personal preference, making them accessible and welcoming for all women over 60 regardless of background, health status, or relationship situation, because the goal is not to impose a rigid formula but to invite exploration, play, and kindness toward oneself. And this invitation is an open door to rediscovering pleasure, confidence, and joy in ways that nourish the body, mind, and spirit simultaneously. And as more women take this journey, they become beacons of what it means to age with grace, passion, and unapologetic sensuality, inspiring generations to come and redefining the very meaning of what it means to be a woman over 60 in today's world, proving beyond doubt that life after 60 is not the end of desire but the beginning of a beautiful, rich, and deeply fulfilling chapter. And as we draw this journey to a close, it's essential to reflect on the profound truth that sensuality, confidence, and desire are not just youthful pursuits but lifelong expressions of our humanity. And for women over 60, embracing these three sensual practices, mirror work, embodied movement, and conscious touch, can be nothing short of transformative, reshaping not only how they feel in their bodies but how they relate to themselves and the world around them in a deeply empowering way. And this empowerment radiates far beyond the personal realm, influencing relationships, social connections, and even community dynamics, because when women reclaim their sensuality with authenticity and joy, they model a new narrative of aging, one that is vibrant, dynamic, and filled with possibility rather than limitation. And it's worth emphasizing that this reclamation is an act of courage, especially in a society that often marginalizes or invisibilizes the desires and bodies of older women. Making their decision to prioritize pleasure and confidence a revolutionary stance that challenges harmful stereotypes and demands respect. And in practical terms, this means setting aside time daily or weekly to engage in these sensual rituals, carving out space for oneself without guilt or distraction, and allowing the body to guide the experience rather than forcing or rushing it. And whether it's 5 minutes of tender mirror gazing, a gentle dance session with favorite music, or a slow, mindful self-massage with fragrant oils, each act is a powerful affirmation of worthiness and delight. And as these moments accumulate, they build a reservoir of confidence and sensual energy that women can draw on whenever life feels challenging, lonely, or overwhelming, serving as a reminder that their pleasure and presence matter deeply. And importantly, these practices also encourage a shift in mindset, from seeing sensuality as something that must be earned, hidden, or relegated to private moments, to viewing it as a vital and joyful aspect of daily life that enriches everything from morning routines to social outings to quiet evenings at home. And this mindset shift can inspire women to experiment with fashion choices, grooming rituals, or social activities that align with their renewed sense of self, sparking a holistic revitalization that encompasses mind, body, and spirit. And for those navigating health challenges or physical limitations, these sensual practices can be tailored gently and compassionately, focusing on what feels good in the moment and celebrating small victories of connection and pleasure, because sensuality is not about perfection or endurance but about presence and kindness to oneself. And the stories shared by countless women who have embraced these practices reveal a common thread of joy rediscovered, pain released, and confidence rekindled, reminding us that it's never too late to rewrite the narrative of our bodies and desires. And as these women step into their power, they create ripples that uplift communities, shift cultural perceptions, and open the door for future generations to age with less fear and more freedom. And in closing, remember that the journey to sensual confidence after 60 is uniquely personal, filled with ups and downs, discoveries and rediscoveries. And by committing to these three practices, you're inviting a vibrant new chapter of joy, connection, and self-love into your life, one that honors the wisdom of your years while celebrating the fierce, beautiful sensuality that never truly fades. And with this commitment, you can move forward with a renewed sense of vitality and grace, knowing that your desire, your pleasure, and your confidence are gifts to be cherished and shared, not hidden away. And this is the essence of living fully, passionately, and authentically at any age.